In this daily drop, I'm going to use the NANLITE PAVOSLIM 120C along with a neutral 18% or middle gray as my key light source. So let's go. All right, everybody. It is Sunday here in the barn. Brand new week coming up. Episode 286 of the Daily Drop. And as is pretty common with me, because I'm a little bit obsessed with all of this stuff, I was mucking about for pretty much the whole day here in the barn. And one of the reasons I was doing it is I started to get a little bit tired of the key light that I was using for my daily drops. There was nothing wrong with it. It was a soft box. It was up high. It was up high because I didn't want to get the reflections of the soft box. It was coming through magic cloth. It was perfectly fine. And by fine, I don't mean mediocrity. I mean, it was nice, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I started scanning the space here for things that might work. I have a lot of options here, but I wanted to try something different. So what I did is I took out the NANLITE PAVOSLIM 120C. It's a 1x2 panel. It's pretty punchy, and this one's the color version. So it has plus minus green, and it comes with this little soft box which stays attached to the unit, and then you can leave it open face, or you can use a grid cloth, which is what I'm using right now, or a magic cloth in front of it. And the grid cloth was a little bit better because it did soften up those LEDs a little bit, but it still had a little bit of punch. The magic cloth, which I do love, was just a little too soft for this particular application, especially because I was pushing through that as sort of a break and then bouncing it off of, and here's the thing, bouncing it off of the EzyFrame from Manfrotto, which is skinned with a gray, a neutral or a middle or an 18% gray. And this is something that I normally use for a background. Gray or neutral gray is great because it'll take on almost any color. But quite frankly, it's not something that I would normally think of as a key light source, something that is my key. But I guess there's no reason not to think of it that way, and that's what I'm doing right now. That is the look that you are seeing on camera at the moment, and I'm basically just taking that 120C, bouncing it off of that middle gray. It's about 6.5 feet by 7.5 feet, so it's a big source, and then that is my key light for this setup. Everything else is the same, and just so that you know what the overall settings are, my camera is set to 1600 ISO at an f2.8, and it's set to about 5900 Kelvin. The source for my key light, meaning the PAVOSLIM 120C, is set to 100% output. I could drop that to probably about 80% output if it was open face, but it's at 100% right now. And then it's set to 5900 Kelvin. But what I was really interested in was what would happen to the color temperature if I was using a neutral or a middle gray as my key light source. And I used the C800 from Sekonic and found out that if I use this at about 5900 Kelvin, it was actually reading at about 5975, that once it bounced off of this middle gray and came back to me, it was about 250 to 300 Kelvin difference, a little bit warmer. So it was reading in the 5600s instead of the 5900s in terms of Kelvin. So it was shifting it just a little bit warmer, or is shifting it a little bit warmer because of that. And this is essentially all I'm bouncing off of is a middle gray. It's just 6.5 by 7.5 feet. And I'm kind of digging it. Really comfortable for talent. Obviously, it's absorbing a little bit more light than if I was bouncing off of a white fabric. And I think at a certain point, what I need to do is I need to do a little bit of a test where I bounce off of middle gray and then I bounce off of white and just try to get my ratios to be, or my levels to be the same. I don't know about ratios, because when I'm bouncing off of the white, it's probably going to scatter a little bit more in the space. Even if I get the same exposure on talent, I'll have to do a test, which means that the background would probably come up just a little. And I am doing some things to mitigate stuff even here. I've got some gaffer's tape on both sides of the EzyFrame. Sometimes I wish these things were black all of the time. I'm a big fan of black light stands, black C stands for that reason. There's less going in and gaffing and doing things to take away specular highlights and things like that that can occur. And then in order to handle, now that I've got a source coming from this direction and bouncing off of this, flares going into the lens of that camera, I have set a RoadRags solid, which is just sitting there next to the teleprompter. The problems increase when you're using a teleprompter because you also have glass there on top of everything else. So you've got a monitor, you've got glass, and it's not just your lens. So you've really got to be careful in terms of handling those flares. And then just to slow down or bring the light levels down a little bit in the background from the bounce in the space, I also have a RoadRags II solid, which is, instead of that one over there being 18 by 24, the larger one is 24 by 36. And that's just sitting on the other side of that key light to just, again, slow down the light so it's not hitting that background as much. I hope that all makes sense. I'm digging the PavoSlim 120C, and the one thing that I want to mention about that light, besides the fact that it has plus minus green, which is great, is that the PavoSlim is silent. It's not making any noise, even that 240C. So it's great in small spaces, and I think I'm going to be using them a lot in my productions. I'm kind of digging the middle gray as a bounce here. Don't knock it until you try it. Don't forget to, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.